Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live broadcast of The Personalized Patient Journey, a new standard of patient centricity. I'm Jeannie Linke Northrup, Managing Editor, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We are pleased to bring you this webcast presented by Pharmaceutical Executive and sponsored by VMS BioMarketing. VMS BioMarketing is the leading provider of patient engagement solutions, integrating human connection, advanced technology, and real-world data to deliver holistic support in a personalized environment. Leveraging 25 plus years experience in patient engagement, their one-voice model empowers biopharma teams to optimize the right mix of interventions for each individual patient. We have a few important announcements I'd like to make before we begin with today's broadcast. This webcast is designed to be interactive, and so I kindly encourage you to ask questions to our guest presenter today who's doing the event. You can submit your questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found at the bottom of your video player. You can enlarge your slide window by clicking on the small icon in the right bottom corner of your media player. Please note that all slides will advance automatically during the event. If you experience any technical problems viewing or hearing this presentation, please click on the question mark help widget, which is located in the top right of your presentation window. I would now like to introduce today's guest speaker. I'm pleased to be joined today by Josh Konitsny, currently the Head of Business Development and Senior Vice President at VMS BioMarketing. Josh has spent his career providing solutions to the healthcare industry across a very wide range of technology, data, marketing-driven initiatives. Josh previously held leadership sales, business development, and marketing roles. And through his effort and collaboration, his organizations have partnered with and supported hundreds of the top pharmaceutical companies, pharmacies, and other healthcare organizations, all with an ultimate aim of improving outcomes for patients. Josh, welcome.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. Really appreciate that.
I'm looking forward to today's discussion. And I know one other thing I'd like to mention to our audience today is that we'll have some great interaction through some polling questions, which we'll be getting to in a little while. Josh, please go ahead and feel free to get us started with your presentation.
Wonderful, Jeannie. Thank you again. Really appreciate that. And thank you to Pharmaceutical Executive for VMS's participation in hosting this webinar. So this is great. So today we're going to discuss the personalized patient journey, and this is really a new standard in patient centricity. We'll review the following aspects to really personalizing the experience for patients while they take their critical medications, and these are often life-saving medications. You'll really understand the importance of personalization by the time we're finished. We're going to look at patients' expectations from pharma based on the experience that they have as consumers. And we're going to look at the importance of personalization on health outcomes and really how that also equates to improved business outcomes. But pharma faces challenges, so we're going to review some of those roadblocks. And we'll also go through the importance of data, digital technologies, and social determinants of health, all of which have major roles with personalized healthcare. We're going to discuss the 5 pillars of really what to prioritize when you're building out personalization with your patient experience. And like I said, by the end, I hope you'll agree, patients deserve greater personalization with their therapy management. So let's talk for a second about just consumers in general. We have different personalization expectations. For instance, we can get a customized latte at our local coffee shop. We can make a customized playlist right on our phone. And we can even have tailored fashion recommendations with just a few clicks. So it's really no wonder that we consumers and we patients are really increasingly demanding this kind of personalization from pharmaceutical companies. So we're going to review this new standard of patient centricity that's being established in our industry, and really one where personalization is no longer a nice to have, but it's now becoming a critical element to many of these patient support programs. So quickly, let's talk about VMS biomarketing. And Jeannie, again, thank you for that introduction. As a company, we provide patient engagement solutions within biopharma, life sciences industry, and we've done this for over 25 years. We help our manufacturer clients build lasting relationships with their patients, and we do this by delivering a differentiated patient experience. So VMS, we are combining the use of data-driven technology with the human connection. And that's really from our nurse educators who are supporting patients each and every day. And we're also using the intelligence of our behavioral science to optimize and ensure that we're delivering support that's dynamic, holistic, and meaningful. And frankly, what's exciting to see is that there's so many real-world examples of how companies today are starting to rapidly advance their capabilities in personalization. They are moving from, and many of these companies are moving from this one-size-fits-all model to a much more personalized, holistic one-to-one model. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's first understand what are the main drivers for why greater personalization in pharma support programs is critical. So again, we need to meet these demands that we, all of us, have as consumers and as patients and caregivers, and we want to mirror those experiences we have from other types of consumer offerings. So let's look at a few survey results that are really interesting. The first here is 73% of patients reported that they expect personalized services and support from pharma, and this is from Accenture. So there's an expectation there from patients, and it's a significant amount of patients. 85% of patients believe there's still more that pharma can do to personalize and tailor the support for them, which of course is not surprising. But what I do find surprising is that 54% of patients say that they will switch their care providers if they can get greater personalization. So there's a huge need here that we need to consider. Next, let's look at how the positive effects of health outcomes can be attained through personalization. And there's two really interesting studies, and of course these are two of many that are out there. But we'll first look at UCSF. They examined the impact of personalized patient support programs on medication adherence, and they did that with HIV positive patients. And the study found that the personalized program led to statistically significant improvement in medication adherence compared to a standard program. So this meant that patients were taking their medication more often, which of course had a very positive health benefit to it. Next, we look at University of Michigan, and they compared the personalized support that diabetes patients are getting in their diabetes management. And of course, they compared this to a standardized program as well. And they found that the personalized program resulted in greater improvements of glycemic control and self-efficacy. So these multiple head-to-head studies, again, these are two of many, have shown to have significant impact on patient outcomes, improved medication adherence, increased patient engagement, and better disease management. And so these positive health outcomes can also lead to improved business outcomes. So the business benefits can be significant. So let's look at the advantages to the positive business outcomes that can be achieved. So one, it's pretty simple. When a patient receives personalized support, they're going to feel more valued and more supported. And second, better medication outcomes leads to better business outcomes. The experience that a patient can have, if successful, is that they can actually get on their drug more often, get on their first fill, and then they can stay on their medication more often. That can have a very meaningful effect from a business outcome standpoint. And third, personalization allows companies to manage their resources effectively. And let me just give you an example. If you have a patient who has, let's say, a lower risk factor for being having poor adherence, they may require less hand-holding than a patient who is at a higher risk for having poor adherence. So therefore, the higher cost support can go to the patient with the higher risk, and the lower cost can go to the patient with the lower risk. It's obvious, but this is, if you're not personalizing, then you're not knowing this. Then you're not knowing about these patients. You're not knowing how to provide the right support to them. And then, of course, there's the importance of really differentiating from competitors. Personalization allows you to do that. And then just the overall market reputation for the brand and for the manufacturer. And specifically, that can be the case with non-patient customers as well.
Thanks, Josh. I absolutely love this topic, so I'm really excited to get into some of the audience polling questions here personally. I also really liked the way you tied in that latte. Very nice. So our first question to our audience, and we ask you if you'd kindly respond, is what is the level of personalization being delivered in your patient support programs today? And we'll give everyone a moment to respond to this question. Some of the responses include no personalization, low personalization. You can also select medium personalization, as well as high personalization. So we'll give everyone about 30 seconds. And one more time, the question, what is the level of personalization being delivered in your patient support programs today? Do you see any personalization at all? And if you do, low, medium, or high personalization? Okay, Josh, feel free to react to some of our audience's reactions and responses.
I will. Jeannie, it's actually where I thought it would be. It's so our highest, unfortunately, at almost 50% is low personalization. And then our second highest is medium personalization. So kind of in the middle, trending on the low side, unfortunately. But that's okay. We're going to talk a bit about why that actually might be the case. So we are going to talk about the challenges that pharma faces. Facing a lot of challenges here, but fortunately, things are rapidly changing for the better. So as an industry within pharmaceuticals, we're somewhat behind, obviously, other industries. And we know that. We've been reminded of that, of other webinars we've been on, articles we've read, conferences we've attended. But let's just talk about why that's happening. And then a little bit of, we're going to start to talk about what's being done about this. And it's in a positive trend. But first, there's the lack of data integration. Getting data, and especially patient data, is a huge challenge in pharma. How you get the data and then what you do with the data. So it's really like the integration of the data with so many different data sources and really assessing that data, gleaning out insights and gleaning out ways that can help you kind of optimize that patient experience. This is not easy stuff to get. Many patients also don't have access to digital technologies. And it's not just access, it's experience. It's having a lack of experience with digital technologies. So it's tough to personalize the experience when there are varying degrees of access and experience that patients have with digital technologies. Third is resources. I mean, personalization is resource intensive. It just is. The next challenge here is just the resistance to change. The industry has always had some form of resistance to change. Again, my line of work, I'm seeing it change dramatically, which is great. I'm seeing innovation taking place, but there's still that resistance that we see. And of course, there's the regulatory constraints, privacy, compliance, other types of legal considerations that every manufacturer has to have. But again, despite these challenges, we've all seen that there's a transformation taking place, and many pharma companies are investing significant resources, significant budget, effort in really moving towards this more personalized patient support model. And they have to, because we as consumers are taking in health information in so many different ways, and it's really just being democratized. The access that we have as patients out there is incredible now. 72% of patients here say that they look up their health information online. I would imagine that would be even more than that. So patients are very much empowered to learn more on their own. But then at the same time, 63% of patients report that they'd be willing to share their data with pharma directly with the hopes of greater personalization. So let me actually say that again, because I think it's a really important stat. 63% of these patients, 6 out of 10 patients, are actually saying that they would be willing to provide their personal data with pharma with the hopes of greater personalization. So think about how important this is to patients and what they're willing to provide to gain access to that personalized care that they're looking for. There's definitely a patient need. So we'll talk a little bit about data, and I also mentioned we're going to talk about digital technologies as well as social determinants of health and really what their role is within personalization. So what we're looking at here is how pharma is using data to power personalization in patient support programs. So first, we're going to look at data collection. So data collection is really the first aspect of this. How does pharma gain access to patient-related data? And this data can be on patients' health, behavior, preferences, needs, and it can come from different channels. It can come from surveys, from patient health records, from wearables. There are many different ways in which we can gain access to that type of data, but we need to collect that data first. And so then once that data is then collected, we analyze the data. So we are starting to identify patterns, trends that can really be used to try to start to determine what's the type of support that will be needed. And of course, there's technologies like artificial intelligence, there's machine learning that can be used to really analyze these large data sets and identify and glean insights from that as well. So next, we start to develop patient profiles. Think of a patient profile like segments or cohorts. You have some patients due to characteristics are here, other patients are here, and it could be demographics, health status, behavioral patterns, different preferences, but they go into these different cohorts. Now we're starting to personalize who these patients are. And so now we can start to actually match those different segments, cohorts, profiles to personalized support. So now we're starting to hit up those different cohorts with different types of personalized support. But look, all this support, it needs to be powered, and oftentimes can be powered by digital technologies, digital tools, even the human connection as well. What we're going to focus on next is we're going to talk about digital technologies such as wearables, remote monitoring devices, telemedicine, you name it, really in bringing this personalization to life for patients. First, we're going to look at the emergence of digital tools and technologies. Some really interesting stats here from Deloitte. The top left, 80% of the respondents in the study they did indicated that they're using one or more digital tools to manage their health. So 8 out of 10 patients, that's incredible. And then below that, 48% of patients are leveraging wearables to track their health. That's a big number too. So the emergence is growing significantly with digital tools. And next, we're going to just look at what are some of those types of tools, like how can we bucket them and understand the types of tools that are being used right now within personalizing the patient support experience for patients. And so, VMS is breaking this down in 4 categories of digital technologies that are bringing this personalization to life. You may argue that there's other categories that we can add, but these are some of the common aspects of patient support that we see with digital tools. And the first is interactive virtual tools. We're looking at 3D animations, virtual reality, augmented reality. These are all very unique and very powerful technology tools that help engage patients and help those patients in a lot of ways better understand their own health conditions and their own treatments while being out there to provide personalized support that can help with the patient's health outcome. Chatbots are another important aspect here, where you're talking about real-time engagement, real-time feedback, real-time support, and that's often between a patient and artificial intelligence. It can also be human connection to some degree as well, but that really gives patients what they need in the moment they need it. A specific example that we have here is Merck had, and this is a few years ago, but they had a chat box called Ava that was used for personalized support for diabetes patients. Reminded patients to take their medications, gave them tips around healthy eating, exercise, and just really like overall guidance on managing their diabetes condition. Next, we have gamification. Gamification utilizing various types of gaming to incentivize healthy behaviors. Incentivize healthy behaviors and also providing feedback back to patients, letting them know how versed are you within a disease set and your knowledge, and how are you in terms of treating your own disease, and how how involved are you from that standpoint. So gamification is another important, highly engaging, personalized way that pharma is engaging with patients. And then there's remote monitoring. And this is really collecting real-time data on patients' health and their treatment progress, but also getting the right interventions to patients at the right time. Oftentimes, remote monitoring can do that as well. So this data can really be used to help engage with patients in a virtual manner, and really provide support in the moment they need it. So next, we're going to look at, and we're going to shift here from digital technologies to health inequity, so social determinants of health, which I'm going to abbreviate to SDOH, which is what we often call that in the industry. And we're going to look at just how personalization helps to tackle these health inequities. And social determinants of health, SDOH, it's increasingly recognized as a major contributor to health disparities and to poor health outcomes. And interesting stats here. So nearly half the patients in this study reported that they felt like the healthcare system doesn't care about people like me. And according to a report by Accenture, personalizing patient support programs can really address these social determinants of health and improve health outcomes. The report found that up to 68% of patients said they would be more likely to follow a prescribed care plan if that care plan accounted for their SDOH. And then additionally, patients who received personalized support actually saw an improvement with their SDOH, and they reported a 78% positive impact on their health outcomes as well. Okay, Jeannie.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Very interesting. So I'd like to ask our audience if they would kindly respond to another question and interact with us a bit. We're looking forward to collecting some responses here to talk a little bit more about SDOH. So our next polling question to our audience: how much emphasis do your patient support programs place on addressing SDOH? And again, we'll give everyone a moment to respond to this question. Response options include no emphasis, to low emphasis, to moderate emphasis, and even a high emphasis. Give everyone a little bit of time to respond to this. We'll collect some responses. So one more time, how much emphasis do your patient support programs place on addressing SDOH? Are you seeing any emphasis at all? And if you are you seeing low, moderate, or a high emphasis on SDOH? Okay, Josh, it looks like we're receiving quite a few responses here. So please, what do you think about these responses?
It's similar to what we saw last. The majority of users, almost 50%, have a low. They're seeing a low emphasis on patient support programs addressing social determinants of health. And next is the moderate emphasis, which is about 35%. So really similar to what we saw before, kind of in the middle on the lower end. So it's really interesting to see that. Not surprising, of course, and unfortunately. But let's talk a little bit about how critical personalization can be in helping to reduce, today's health inequities. It's about being sensitive to the patient and their situation. And look first, you look at their cultural background, and being sensitive to that, and being trained and understanding how to work with patients in different types of cultural situations. Also, their spoken language. It's a little obvious, but being want to be sensitive to the fact that we do speak different languages and at times, and how do we provide support to patients in a multilingual setting. But there's other barriers. So, patients are going to face barriers in their lives that, they could be related to housing, to income, to their employment status, to their family, things going on in their family, to getting food, enough food. And actually, I was at a conference myself a few weeks ago. I heard a really interesting feedback from a pharmaceutical company who spoke about health inequities and how devastating it can be for health management. And they talked about patients who couldn't get access to food. They couldn't feed their families. And, they just asked the question, how the heck can that patient stay adherent to their medication? That's not as important to feeding your family. So it's really the, patient support programs, and when personalized, can really have an impact here. We could start to actually connect patients with social services, with financial assistance. There's more that we can do that goes beyond just supporting them with their therapy. With SDOH, the consideration here is that we want to equal the playing field for all patients. We want to give all patients an opportunity to get access to their medications, and we want to give them the opportunity to stay on their medication and to stay on it properly. So that's really the consideration that we're having here with SDOH, and personalization can have a huge impact on being able to deliver in a positive manner. Now, when we say personalization, there are 5 key pillars to what it looks like in practice for pharma support programs. And what I want you to consider here are these 5 pillars are really what you want to base your the build of this program on. And consider all 5 of these. These are really critical aspects. The first is with tailored. That's really where personalization comes into play. It should be obvious. We want to have a tailored experience for patients. The next is dynamic, and with dynamic, you're providing support that's in the moment, but it's also adaptive. It's flexible to the situation. It evolves. It knows that patients and their patient journey is going to evolve. So it needs to evolve with those patients. The next is streamlined. Streamlined is really important because you want to make sure that you're giving the patient a consistent support. So they're not hearing from different sources. They're not getting information from different places. It needs to be essentially provided in a very consistent, seamless manner for the patient. Another important aspect with streamlining is setting the right expectation for a patient. With patient support programs, we find at VMS that one of the ways we can be very successful in working with patients is to set the right expectations for those patients up front and let them know, here's the support that you're going to receive. Here's also what's going to occur as you take the medication, but here's the support and here's how we're going to work with you. And then you want to make sure you deliver on that. That's another important aspect. Next is integration. So integration, what we're getting at here is that there's a lot coming at the patient, especially with critical complex medications. The patient is working with their hub, maybe from a financial aspect. They're working with their pharmacy to gain access to their medication. Their provider, of course, is involved. And then there's other components that are involved. But you want to integrate everything. You want to make sure as much as possible, and I recognize it's not easy, but as much as possible, you want to make sure all these partners and all this support is integrated so that the patient is receiving this consistent support from all of these different sources. And lastly, you want it to be holistic. We are going beyond financial barriers here. We're starting with patient support. We're starting to hit up the emotional kind of behavioral burdens that are taking place for patients. It's a really important aspect to making sure that they are successful in taking their medication. So really delivering on these 5 pillars successfully is what we're aiming to do here. But what we're finding is that the view of the patient journey has to evolve as well. So let's talk about that. Traditionally, the patient journey in pharma was really viewed as a linear process, starting with a patient seeking medical attention and ending with some sort of resolution or lack thereof of their health issue. However, patients are no longer passive recipients of healthcare. We've been talking about that. And so to achieve greater personalization, our view is that this journey must shift. So recognizing the complexity and dynamic nature of really how a patient goes through their disease and medication management is something we need to understand. And this includes the holistic elements of support that are emotional and behavioral, again, outside of just financial. And having access to patient-generated health data, that means you get to learn what's going on with the patient. And that's an important aspect to this. So this new age view allows us to create greater personalization for patients and move away from that one-size-fits-all model that we've discussed. And by appreciating this complexity and dynamic nature of a patient's experience, we're able to deliver planned interventions and the right interventions at the right time while evolving with the patient's needs. Again, patients' needs are going to change over time. We need to evolve. Personalization helps us to do that. We also, what we're including these emotional and behavioral elements, and this can help inform the type of support that's required for each patient. And we also learn over time that helps us to optimize the support that's provided to patients. And by having access to patient-generated health data, these support programs can then be further tailored based on real-time insights and behaviors that we're learning about from patients. And lastly, patients are becoming more empowered. They're getting in more control of their healthcare than ever before. So this doesn't have to just be a one-way support channel where we're just outputting support to the patient. Let's also give the patient access to self-serve tools. Many of these self-serve tools can be highly tailored. They can be customized to deliver on the appropriate patient-driven experience. Now, let's look at the 5 critical success factors. Essentially, where do we go from here, right? So patients need support in so many other areas beyond finances. And these need to be addressed with a real holistic, not a one-size-fits-all approach. And this demand from biopharma companies to deliver personalized patient support, it's increasing. And again, we're seeing it. We're talking to and working with so many brands that have these types of priorities now. So the clients that we're working with and partnered with, they're looking at these 5 critical success factors and really focusing on these. So let's just talk about them briefly. We want to understand the patient journey. They want to understand what's going on with that patient. How's that patient journey evolving? How is it different for different patient groups? It's also about the right communication at the right time. Like, what's that cadence? How do we engage with the patient? If we're reaching out to the patient, is that going to be the right timing for that patient? How is that going to evolve over time? And of course, we're going to utilize data to determine that. Data is going to be absolutely critical through all of this. But we talked about the integration, and that's really the collaboration with partners. You have a lot of partners involved here. We kind of bring them together. It's really, really, really critical that they're all in lockstep together to support the patients. That's obviously the number one goal here. And really the other aspect of this is to maintain. This is not build it and watch it happen. This is build it and continually maintain, continually optimize, and keep at it. This has to evolve. This has to continue to change over time. That's the best way you're going to provide personalization for patients.
Thank you, Josh. So true. What a complicated mix of things going on. Like you said, lots of data and some really great tips and advice there. So these 5 critical success factors, I'd like to ask our audience if they could share what they believe to be the most important in moving this new age of patient centricity. Again, Josh spoke about all of these a bit in detail: understanding the patient journey, timely, meaningful connections, importance of data, obviously some collaboration with partners, or managing as an ongoing process. So again, if we can ask our audience to kindly take a little bit of time out of their day to respond to this polling question, we'll give you about 30 seconds, and then Josh can help react to the responses. Again, of the 5 critical success factors that Josh just outlined previously, which do you believe to be the most important in moving forward to this new age or new era of patient centricity? I'll give it another second or two. I'm still seeing everything calculate here. Okay, Josh, great. Please tell us, what are you thinking about these results that are coming in from our audience?
All right, this is pretty cool. All right, so what we see, Jeannie, is the number one is actually I'm going to start with the number 2 and 3. So the the third one is timely and meaningful connection, and then the second one is the importance of data, and then number 1, the winner, is understanding the patient journey. So I want to talk about that for a second. I think that's really interesting. I certainly didn't know what the top ones would be. But what I want to say about patient journey is we at VMS, we're providing support to patients each and every day through technology, through data, as well as through nurse educators who are working with our organization. And it's really interesting. Patients they don't think of it as a patient journey. They think of it as their life, right? And so we also want to be mindful to that as well. We're all building out the patient journey. We're all, working to optimize that. But we also just have to be mindful that the journey is their life, and their life is personalized. It's personalized to their situation. And I think that's just a really critical aspect to how we look at, personalization as well as the patient journey. All right, great. So we're going to move on to the next slide. And, 2 more points I want to make here I think are really important. We've talked a lot about personalization. I know I've used that word a lot. That's obviously the topic here that we're focused on. And it's so key because, my gosh, most patient support programs are really just this one-size-fits-all model. Again, we're moving to personalization, which is fantastic. But you know what? There's a future state, and it's not future state for everybody, but that's moving to individualized support. So personalization is more of those kind of cohorts, the segments, the profiles that I talked about. We're starting to move to a one-to-one basis, and we're starting to see that with the clients that we're working with. So really keep that in mind, that there's another evolution coming as well as we look at individualized support for patients. And to close out, I want to leave you with this. I think this is a really important aspect, and I just didn't want to leave this out of the presentation. Let's not forget about the human touch. There are consistent human support resources out there, and they are critical to the overall patient support strategy. They have to be considered. Because look, as great as digital technologies are, and as great as what the data tells us, they all can fall short here and there, and they can fall short in empathy. They can fall short in building trust as well. So the human connection is just another really critical aspect that we want to incorporate here as well. I want to thank everyone so much for your time, for listening, and looking forward to answering questions that you may have.
Thank you, Josh. And with that said, we're going to get ready to move on to a Q&A session. As I alluded to earlier, we ask the audience to kindly help participate and send any questions you have to Josh over through the Q&A feature box. And that can be found directly below your video player. I have seen some great questions coming in throughout the broadcast. So we will kick this off. So our first question, Josh, you mentioned that personalized support requires human touch as well. Very good point. How do you recommend that brands continue to use resources like clinical nurse education while still driving efficiencies in their programs?
Okay, all right. So let me think about this one, Jeannie. So VMS, our experience working with many pharmaceutical organizations, it's really not about one or the other. It's about the blend of, and really like the proper integration of digital technologies that, if you think about it, digital technologies enable efficiencies. The human touch, that really powers the opportunity for that empathy, but for that significant support that can be provided for patients. So that's a really important aspect to keep in mind. And I think also just if you want to kind of dig a little deeper, having options for patients, what do they prefer? How do they want to be engaged with? Do they want to be engaged with via a mobile app, via text message? Is there a phone call, or do they want in-person visits? There's just a lot of different aspects there, and patients are going to be different in what they are comfortable with. And so we just have to be mindful of that. And I think providing as many options as possible is going to allow you to engage with as many of those patients as possible, which is what we're trying to do here. Integration is just such a key also. It's just really integrating the digital side, the patient side. And I think, one other point would just be learning about, patient experiences and using that to essentially help optimize and inform on future strategy as well. So hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you, Josh. Josh, are you able to provide any examples of patient segmentation processes?
Yeah, it's a tough one. This might require another hour-long webinar. But that's actually one of the things one of the aspects my company really excels at. We go in with clients, really understand their business, understand their patients, and then we start to really develop out the different types of patient profiles based on data, based on other types of experiences and data points that we or the client may have. And so we start to build out those different profiles. The profiles are going to be varied. It's going to be varied by therapeutic area, by the brand, by other factors. You're going to look at demographic data. You're going to look at different types of risk analysis that you may see. There's just going to be a lot of different ways in which you're going to kind of slice and dice that. But that's one of the kind of key ways in which we operate and we start to build out our programs. We just need to make sure we understand who are those different patient groups and how are we going to provide the right service and support to those patient groups. Again, that would be an hour-long webinar. I'd love to do that as well.
Another question that came in that kind of keeps to that theme, Josh, in terms of your services, resources, do you also provide digital technology solutions to pharma?
My organization absolutely does VMS BioMarketing. We combine that with the human connection aspect of it. Yeah, so Great. It's a big piece of what we do. As I said in the first question that I answered, you want to have an efficient aspect of it as well. You also want to have options for patients, right? So that's why we combine the human touch and the digital tool approach as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Providers have no time. Oh, I did want to get to this question, Josh, because we started talking a little bit about engagement, and we commonly hear that providers don't have that time for the personalized care, the detailed discussions to patients' disease or therapy. Yet pharma believes that HCPs do not want to engage, CEs with the patients. So with that gap in this challenge, how does VMS address this when speaking to pharma marketing leaders?
Oh my gosh, it's such obviously HCPs and getting to engage HCPs and getting their attention is so unbelievably challenging. So first of all, providers may not have the time for these detailed personal discussions, and that's oftentimes why pharma is building out patient support programs, right? So that's where the personalization comes into play, recognizing that these other customer types aren't able to put the type of effort and time in that is definitely required. So understand that is what drives patient support from a pharmaceutical investment standpoint. I would argue, I've seen the question that so few pharma companies adopt clinical education. I would very much argue that we have a lot of data to suggest a lot of pharma companies are putting significant investment in utilizing clinical nurse educators to educate and train HCPs, which include doctors, mainly nurses, and other staff members around therapies. I think it's just hard for us to see that broadly in the industry. There's not a lot of talk about that, but I can tell you from our experience, it's very significant within the industry. And hopefully that's helpful.
Our next question, because you can never escape any of these conversations without talking a bit about the financial resources, right?
That's
so
right. Yep.
Maybe you can broadly discuss the cost impact of these personalized programs. Are pharma companies generally paying more for these types of programs? What are you seeing here? Is there a higher expense associated?
Yeah, I talked about that resource. It's a resource intensive proposition when personalizing patient support. There could definitely be situations where it could be more costly. I don't think we should look at this from a cost perspective and rather from what you gain perspective, the results of that.
Absolutely.
So it's, the cost factor could be absolutely minimal considering the fact that you are doing a number of very critical things. One is you are providing outstanding experience and support for a patient and for the caregivers as well. That can be invaluable from a competitive differentiation standpoint, from a market reputation standpoint. The other aspect of it is just if you look at the actual, if we're just going to go down and look at like just raw data around script level, personalization is going to help more patients get on their therapy and get to that first fill. And also, personalization is going to help patients stay on therapy longer. It's just the reality. I mean, they're going to have the attention being given to them. That support is going to be absolutely critical. So, I know my company does this. We put together, a business case around that. We show our clients, here's what we would expect the results to look like, so that they can understand that there is a significant positive result, a business outcome, that goes with the program.
Cost versus outcomes, right? Great points. Absolutely. Great points. You discussed some of the digital tools as they're important to bringing in personalization, bringing it to life. What have you seen from your experience in chronic disease populations who are engaging with these digital health solutions?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about virtual reality, remote monitoring. I didn't really talk too much about telehealth, but these are all very kind of common and growing areas of digital tools. Look, what's best to use when? I mean, it depends on your therapeutic area. It depends on the uniqueness of your patient population. It might even depend on you as a manufacturer. What experience does your organization have? Like, where are the comfort levels? What I would say in choosing digital tools, there's considerations to have in really choosing the right tool. I think you want to ask yourself, number one, probably the most obvious, but is it going to work? Is it going to have the key performance indicators that you are setting out to accomplish? Are you going to see a positive health outcome for your patients? Are you going to see a positive business outcome on the business side? But there's other important considerations. When I think about digital tools, I think we all think this, like with an app, for instance, a mobile app. Will patients use it? Will they actually use it? They might download it, doesn't mean they're going to use it. Will the patient know why they're using it? Will they know like what the impact is that they will have because they're using it? And we talked before about access and experience, like can they get it? Do they know how to use it? Is it easy to use? Does it fit into their current life and the demands that we all have in life? Or is it something new, entirely new that they have to do that's just onerous? And I think you want to give patients a choice. And I talked about this before. It's not just like throw one tool out there and expect everyone to use it. Oftentimes, patients are going to have different tools that will be comfortable to them. And so having options is also really, really critical. So those are just some of the things I would think you'd want to keep in mind as you're kind of choosing the best digital tools for your patient support programs.
And you started to talk about patient adherence again, a topic we could talk about in an entirely different broadcast, right? But
Yep.
what are some of the most important tactics to achieve patient adherence?
Um, I, I think this is really important. Adherence it can be burdened by, from a financial standpoint. It can also be burdened by emotional standpoint, um, as well as forgetfulness. So really working with and understanding the patient's needs, their kind of personal livelihood, um, and developing the right plan for that particular patient is going to have the biggest impact out there. So as a conclusion to that, personalization can bring about better adherence strategies, without a doubt. Can help patients in the moment to take their therapy each and every day from a compliance standpoint, and then take their therapy ongoing from a persistence standpoint. Like you said, that can be that's like a few webinars we can do on that one.
Yeah,
Um, so I know I'm giving a high level answer there.
great. Um, I have a question that came in that I think is important to get to, kind of on a side note. If pharma is paying for these programs, will that be a problem as far as a legal perspective?
Um, no. First of all, the answer is no. But I'm not a lawyer. However, I have been so fortunate to work with so many lawyers within my own company, as well as pharmaceutical companies. So no, these programs. What's important is that these programs are not marketing to patients. We are not trying to get a patient to be prescribed a medication. No, these programs are put in place typically after the prescription has been written. So really the idea now is we want to provide support to the patient to help them to gain access to that medication and then to stay on that medication. So these are patient support programs that we're talking about, and the digital tools here are utilized from a patient support standpoint.
And I want to touch on something there. You mentioned, again, the biggest part of personalization or individualization is understanding the patient, right?
Yep.
And using these tools. So I know earlier you did review a slide about data powering personalization. And
Mhm.
we started to go into a discussion about developing patient profiles. What specific factors or variables that companies are using? What are they using to build these patient profiles to learn more?
Yeah, so just it's the data, it's the experiential factors that I'll pick on my company for a second, but that VMS would have as we're building that out for a client. It's also the client's experiential factors that they may have, and you're going to gain that data from clinical trials, from market research that's being done, from a number of different areas. Really, what you're trying to start to understand is just who are these different patient groups and how are they going to interact to certain types of support. So that's really what you're starting to build out. I feel like it's such an important topic. I recognize that from a patient profile standpoint, it's so big that it's hard for me to give very specific answers on it.
And I would almost think that everyone would have a little bit of a different, they'd have some different variables depending, right? Like, again, this
Yeah,
goes into individualized, very, very detail specific. So, very
I
good
totally
point.
agree. Yeah.
So we are running out of time, but there's another question I wanted to get to. How can a company overcome the barrier of privacy? Some patients avoid sharing their personal information. They don't want to be contacted. So how do we navigate around that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I think any kind of consumer industry sees that as well. So we are going to have a pocket of patients that are going to have that type of challenge. Um, I mentioned about setting expectations. I think that's a really important aspect here. Um, you're more willing to provide your information when you know you're going to get value out of it. There was a stat that we showed here that talked about patients were more willing to give their data essentially to pharma with the hopes of greater personalization. Um, I think it's just about how it's positioned, how it's discussed ahead of time with a patient. whether you have an opportunity to do that from a human connection standpoint to set that right expectation, or it's done from a digital standpoint, it's just really it's really working on building that trust with the patient, and putting a significant emphasis into that. With these programs, the patient support programs, and if we can really personalize them as best as possible, what ends up happening is we can have a major impact on health outcomes and business outcomes. You're then going to want to make sure you get access to as many patients as possible with these programs. And yeah, there's going to be some who are going to drop off, who may not be interested, but my gosh, put the investment, put the effort into figuring out and exhausting all ways to gain access to that patient and get them to at least try to utilize these programs, because it's going to have a dramatic impact on that patient, and they need to be told that, and they need to believe that as well. So I think it's a really important aspect is just making sure you can gain access to as many patients as possible.
We are just about out of time, but I have one more question, if you don't mind me asking. I want to talk a little bit about market integration, just very briefly here. How does it, or where does it fit in with digital therapeutics for personalized care? Pharma, health insurance, employers?
All of the above. All the above, absolutely. And now, of course, my focus here was more on the pharmaceutical side of the industry. We can talk a lot about the payer side, the employer group side, which has similarities. What the big difference is, I think that the similarities is that we're all trying to achieve greater health outcomes, and then there's, of course, a business outcome with that as well. The difference is that pharma is using patient support programs, digital tools, personalization to help provide an outstanding experience for a patient and help that patient while they're taking the medication. The payer employer group model is going to look at that a little differently, also from a positive aspect, but what they're going to look at is trying to take down costs in one way or another. So the digital tools, personalization has a different kind of meaning, a different feel on the payer employer group side of things. So I just think that's an important distinction.
And again, why data can be so complex, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, Josh, thank you. This was a terrific presentation. Again, we have quite a few questions that came in from the audience that we won't even have time to get to today live. Definitely a discussion that you can go on and on and on and have separate discussions on each smaller variable over time. But I do want to let our audience know that Josh and his team will be reviewing and responding to your questions offline as well. So thank you again for your participation. With that, I'd like to wrap up today's discussion. I'd like to thank our sponsor, VMS BioMarketing, for making today's educational webcast possible. I'd like to encourage everyone in the audience to participate in a brief survey. The survey will appear on your screen just after today's presentation has concluded. And I'd also like to thank our audience for their time and commitment for registering for today's webcast. I'd like to remind you all that this broadcast will continue to be available to you moving forward. You'll also be receiving an email alerting you when this webcast is available for replay. And we invite you to forward that announcement to colleagues who may have missed today's live event. So Josh, VMS BioMarketing, our audience, to everyone involved, thank you so much for a great presentation today. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.